so-called no-fault evictions. So we're in a position where when you end those no fault evictions, we'll move into a phase where basically you can no longer be evicted, having done nothing wrong as a tenant. You're no longer just going to be given 2 months to pack your bags and leave. Instead, there's specified grounds for eviction. There has to be a reason given by the landlord, which there's only a small range of reasons that could be given. And you'll be given 4 months' notice if the landlord is moving in because of their own need. For example, if they need to sell the home or move in themselves or a family member. So major changes to eviction law. There's a change to tenancies as well. So you'll go on to rolling tenancies at all times. So it means that those protections that you have from eviction are baked in at all times, and you're protected as well for the first year from any type of eviction that isn't your fault as well. So that's really helpful. And then there's a host of other elements to the law, which we'll probably pick up on a few as we go through. But some of the big ones that Generation Rent campaigned on include, for the first time ever, we'll have a database of landlords. It seems crazy that we're this far into the 21st century without even necessarily knowing who our landlord is sometimes, but that's been a big call of ours for a long time. We're going to raise standards in homes through the Decent Home Standard, which is basically the minimum protections, the types of quality that you need to have in a home to make it safe, will now be the same in private rented homes as it is in social housing. So that's really good news. And then there's other areas, again, I think we'll get into more detail later, but you're looking at, for example, the right to request a pet and not have that unreasonably refused by your landlord. Great news for pet owners or aspiring pet owners out there who are renting. We also have the end of bidding wars. So you're going to no longer can you queue around the block looking for somewhere to rent, only to find that when you reach the door, the price has gone up just because of the landlord rubbing their hands together and spotting that they can make the most of pitting tenant against tenant in that context. So that's really good news as well to end bidding wars. And alongside that, ending rent in advance payments as well, which is another way in which landlords will get people to compete with each other or demand more when there's no real justification for it. We just want to live in our homes and pay a reasonable price for that. So you won't have to be paying rent in advance anymore beyond 1 month, which is what you'd usually pay for your rent anyway. So those are all really good news. There's loads more packed into there that you probably heard about on Tuesday if you were part of that webinar. If not, you can see it on our YouTube channel, but we may pick up on some more as we go. Just a quick note on our recording. So this webinar is being recorded, but don't worry if you're in the audience, you won't be seen on it at all. So it's just us, our friendly faces that you'll have to see on that recording. Again, that's just to go on our YouTube channel as well after this is finished. But beyond that, there's a Q&A that's possible within this webinar. Hopefully you can see it at the bottom of the webinar here. It's a Q&A function. So if you want to type any questions in, I'll try and pick them up as we go. But without further ado, let's introduce our wonderful guests for today. So first of all, I'm Ben Toomey. I'm the Chief Executive of Generation Rent, and I have the privilege and the pleasure of leading this wonderful organisation and being part of such a fantastic movement of supporters that we have as well. I've been with Generation Rent for just over 2 years. It's felt longer than that in many ways and shorter in other ways, but I certainly saw through the 2 iterations of this law that we've currently got in terms of the Renters Reform Bill, which actually collapsed just before the last election and was actually a slightly weaker version of what we ended up with. And now this Renters' Rights Bill, which we've been pursuing for over a year now with the new government as well. But 2 years pales into insignificance compared to my colleague and friend Dan Wilson-Craw, who's joining us, who is the Deputy Chief Executive of Generation Rent and has been on this journey since the beginning in terms of the organisation, where he was among the first employees taken on back in 2014. So over 11 years with Generation Rent now. Pleasure to have you with us, Dan.
Thanks very much. Yeah, it's been a journey and a half, but yeah, shall I crack on and sort of take you through the that journey and how we got here?
That'd be great.
So,
thank you.
I've got a couple of slides to make things a bit easier. So that's just loading now. Should be able to see that in a moment. Can you see that?
Not yet, I'm afraid.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll so yeah, 2014 was when we started when we first got funding uh to employ a team. Um, that's when I joined in March that year. And we well, very early on we were suddenly the National Voice of Private Renters started finding things to the needed changing. From the very start, we knew that we needed better security, safer homes, and more affordable homes. So a big part of our campaign at an early stage was around a landlord register. At the time, we were keen to see basically longer tenancies rather than end the Section 2021 as such. Although we did a big part of the first year was campaigning with Shelter and some trade unions around ending revenge evictions. So that ability for landlord to use Section 21 to kick you out if you complain. We got that. It was a bit of a tweak to the law, but it basically just meant that if the council had come in, inspected the property and found something wrong with it that you'd complained about, then the landlord couldn't evict you using Section 21 for 6 months, which was a sort of it wasn't much. It didn't. We found it was really difficult to enforce over the years. We knew it wasn't enough, but it was sort of a chink of light, sort of our foot in the door of the government. And that was the Cameron government at the time, who otherwise were really not interested in renting at all. Mostly interested in home ownership, even though that was very hard at the time to actually revive. In 2015, our campaigning helped to push Labour into a position where they were backing 3-year tenancies at the general election and the manifesto. They obviously lost that election. The Tories won it. And then at the time, we kind of found that the 3-year tenancy stuff wasn't really landing very well with the general public and the people we were representing. I think a lot of people were thought, well, 3 years 3 years sounds like a long time to be committed to a particular home. There was this real need for flexibility as well as security for renters, and a group of local renter groups had been calling for just abolishing Section 21 entirely, and so we adopted that as well in 2015, and worked out how to how to start dismantling that. Even though at the time it looked quite there was that lack of interest from the Conservatives. 2016 we had the referendum. Theresa May became Prime Minister, and suddenly the tone of the government changed. So I think the kind of shock of the referendum helped to kind of shift focus and make the government realize that actually they need to help people like renters who are not benefiting from the status quo at the time. One of the early things that they did was announce a ban on letting agent fees. So that was something we worked on for the next couple of years. In 2018, we launched the End Unfair Evictions campaign with a couple of the renters unions that had just emerged. So London Renters Union got set up in 2016. Acorn had been going and expanding for a couple of years at that point as well. We also had the the New Economics Foundation involved in that campaign as well. We had a government by that point. The May government had decided that actually security tenure was a really important issue, but they took the Labour policy from 2015 to replace our kind of minimal short tenancies with 3-year tenancies. But we decided actually no, we need to go further than that and abolish Section 21 entirely. At the end of a 3-year tenancy, your landlord could still kick you out without needing a reason. That's still a fundamental insecurity for renters. it actually didn't take us very long to get the first commitment from the government to abolish Section 21. That came in spring of 2019 after a big campaign, lots of demonstrations uh, around the consultation petition that we handed into Downing Street. So that was a huge moment. A little bit of a surprise, but I think it was the fact that we had such a good case to go much further the 3-year tenancies, that we're making the point that this isn't going to be enough for renters who are who both need security and flexibility. The idea of a 3-year tenancy you're locked into is leaving people cold, even though I think they were saying that you could move out of a 3-year tenancy if you wanted to. Obviously the pandemic hit in 2020. There were some temporary protections against eviction at that point, but ultimately there's still people were still vulnerable, particularly when the restrictions were lifted. And then since then, we've seen rents increase by a lot, and a lot of people being forced to move because of rising rents and landlords using Section 21 to force rents up. Finally, in 2022, we got the government's full proposals. That was the white paper in 2022, and that included plans to bring in the landlord register. I think they were calling it a property portal at that time, and then since then it's been Labour's call it a private registered property database. I'm still calling it a national landlord register. We had the bill that the Tories brought in, the Renters Reform Bill, as Ben mentioned. That was in 2023. It was a real fight to kind of get that through, and where it was seeing kind of opposition from a lot of conservative backbenchers from the early stages, and then there was a big delay between the first House of Commons processes and the House of Lords, while the government were trying to appease its backbenchers, who were basically saying we need to bring back fixed terms, we need to weaken these protections for tenants, and in a good kind of way, the election in 2024 and the resulting collapse of the bill was a good thing. I think, obviously there's been a lot of people who have faced eviction in the time since then, and so, but which is, it would have been better to have a good bill sooner. But I think the bill we've ended up with from Labour is a better bill than what the Conservatives were proposing. We secured some extra protection, so if your landlord wants to evict you for most reasons, they will need to be part of the landlord register, which is something we were pushing for, but the Conservatives hadn't really accepted at the time. So that was good. Awab's law, the limits on renting, bidding wars, were other things that we were glad to be able to get into this version of the bill. And then over the past few weeks, we've had it sort of sails through the House of Commons because the Labour Party is pretty united on the need for these changes, although there's definitely some improvements that could be made. I think that the fact that the government has a large majority meant that there wasn't that much controversy in the Commons stages, but at the House of Lords, there's just a much wider a mix of views, and so there was a big effort by some peers, hereditary peers, Conservative peers, to again water down some of these protections. They passed some amendments back in the summer, but then the government has managed to resist that, and only obviously this week has managed to overturn those amendments that had been that the Lords had passed originally. So it's a really it sort of it's a strange system. It feels like to get the House of Lords to do something completely different from what they did a few months ago is a big um, it, it took a lot of work, took a lot of skill to make sure that the government had the votes they needed to pass that. So that's the timeline. That's the sort of 10+ years we've had as Generation Rent working on this. I have a few lessons that I can share just from the whole experience very briefly. One thing campaigners need to know about is that politicians there's a lot of kind of cynicism about politicians not doing anything that they don't want to do. A lot of concern about how many MPs are landlords, for example, but ultimately politicians do care about voters, and the number of private renters has been growing and growing, and so it becomes harder to ignore us. But campaigns need to find a way in. So even if it's the Tories, who are historically not that interested in the renter vote, there's a story to tell them and the way they approach politics in order to get to persuade them that they need to take action on this. It's also really important to have courage in your convictions. So we had a really solid case for abolishing Section 21. And it was better to go with that than just kind of a half measure that we thought that the 3-year tenancy that represented, that wouldn't have been exactly what we wanted. So it's always, we need to go as far as we can, but we need to accept that this might be too far for the powers who will make these decisions. I suppose one thing that we have, a couple of things we wanted to go further on was to have some financial support for tenants who evicted because their landlords are selling up or moving in. Sorry, I've got some kids screaming in the background. And also to go further on rent regulation, but this government hasn't been willing to do that. Sort of felt like a step too far for them, and obviously they're while they're pointing further down, Labour is united on this generally, or united enough to get it through, but they're still cautious. A big part of the party is cautious about more radical change. I think one of the things that we found with the Conservatives, it was really strange because we didn't really encounter this until the bill was actually out. I think there was a lot of recognition in the Conservative press and so on that something needs to happen on this. But then when the bill came out, suddenly you had people coming out saying we need, this is an outrage of property rights, and there was a lot of resistance that sort of came up at that point. So that's just something I think, and what was weird was it was really hard to kind of get into that part of the Conservative Party to understand that this was something they were going to resist. They were, very much like, oh, I don't care about renting. I'm not interested in talking to you. But then, like, suddenly when something's coming in that will actually it goes against that ideology, then that's when they leap into action. So, but then there was another part of the party which was more attuned to what society needs, and the fact that the housing market is not working for a lot of people. The House of Lords is really is an interesting place. There's a lot of we've been lucky in that there's been a lot of peers on the crossbenches in the Liberal Democrats who have been very supportive, been trying to do and have worked with the government. But then there's Lords who will stand up and, as part of the debate, and say, "I'm not going to vote for this because I have many properties that I rent out," and that's just I it's ridiculous how that can be part of our political process. A lot of hereditary peers are in that sort of position, as you might imagine. And also, I think just when they go to bed is another, when they go off to their club to have their dinners, it's like can determine whether a vote whether an amendment gets voted through or not. It's very strange and very kind of I think there's a lot of luck involved for campaigners in that respect. Another thing, looking forward, the strongest security tenure, the fact that renters will have more confidence about dealing with their landlord, more confidence they'll be able to stay in a home for a long period of time, in the same neighborhood for a long period of time, will help renter movement, so that's ourselves, but also renter unions around the country, grow and organize for further change. So that's something to look forward to. But that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dan. That's really, really useful to see it all laid out. And any one of those moments on the timeline could be a whole webinar in itself. It was certainly years in itself per each one, and the same goes for each of those lessons as well. There's so much to get into there, which we will do, but in a moment, because first I want to speak to our other guests here. So welcome, Sandy. We'll come to you in a moment if that's all right. But first, just to introduce Samir Jaraj, who is a board member for Generation Rent, which means he volunteers his time to hold me to account and to support our strategy and advise us as well in our work. He's our longest standing board member, so has been with us since 2017, so over 8 years now on the board, and is also a journalist and an author in his own right as well. Would fully recommend picking up any of his writing whenever you can as well. So Samir, thank you so much for joining us. You've just heard what Dan had to say about the journey over the last 11 years. How has it looked from your perspective, both as a board member, but also as a journalist, seeing all of this?
So, yeah, I mean, it's been an incredible journey, and I think, like when we as a kind of renter movement and Generation Rent will kind of started to push an end to Section 21, like especially under a Conservative government, it did not seem possible. Conservative, especially under David Cameron, Conservatives were very anti any form of regulation. Really, they were only interested in home ownership. But then, as Dan talked about, there started to be these kind of emerging kind of moments. So, so it was Sarah Taylor's private members bill, which then became part of the deregulation bill. Hey, Dan. There was the ban on lettings agency fees, but there was significant progress within Scotland and Wales during this time as well. So you could kind of see a direction of travel, and I think as well, just in terms of where kind of the media conversation on it went. If I've been writing about housing probably since about like 2010-ish, and kind of like before 2010, writing journalism about housing was largely kind of property perspective, how to buy a home, how to become a landlord. It was very much kind of that kind of mode. You might get a bit of like social affairs journalism about social housing, but then in part because of the collapse of owner occupation after following the 2008 like housing crisis, and then this kind of like socialization of private rented housing following the kind of welfare reform and the like disinvestment in social housing under austerity, then had this kind of situation of whereby there was far more going on within housing, and journalists were noticing it. The cynical part of me kind of would say the journalists who might have expected to own a home early in their life no longer could. In the same way that maybe kind of politicians and public figures were encountering the housing crisis through the experience of their kids and grandkids in a way that I think was very, very different to how things had been 10 years earlier. journalists were reporting kind of quite extensively on case studies and stories of where people have been evicted in outrageous circumstances. I remember I think this is one of our ones around I think this is the 2014 the Sarah Tether Private Members Bill, where there was kind of people receiving cancer treatment who were who had just happened to be evicted from their home like during their treatment, and then had to find somewhere else to live. Like it started to show actually this is a deeply unfair and disruptive power that has been given to landlords and serves no real social or even economic purpose beyond their short-term gain. It was highly disruptive for the economy and for kind of the labour force as well. So, within London, you increasingly had larger employers talking about how well they can't find places for staff that are kind of starting on in kind of junior roles. So all these kind of city firms were trying to kind of get landlords to try and rent to their employees, because actually the system was becoming untenable. So I think in part it was kind of against that kind of broader backdrop of the housing market and system becoming increasingly dysfunctional that they kind of this kind of surprising move from Theresa May to shift towards abolishing Section 21. And it was a really big and surprising moment. I literally remember I was in on holiday in New York, and I got a message on something like on Friday, like on Monday Section 21 is going to be abolished, and it was incredible news. And I think kind of the fact that it took so long was concerning throughout, because at any point in any of the changes to Prime Minister, it could have been dropped. But I think it was interesting that no one really seemed to actively seek to drop that commitment to abolishing Section 21. Like, I think maybe under the Truss government it wasn't really talked about, but the Truss wasn't really around long enough to like make a thing of it. But it kind of like survived multiple prime ministers under the Tories, and then Labour not wanting to be outflanked by the Tories, and and being persuaded by our case put across them over the years, kind of got on board. And I think again, like, Labour's shifting internal politics is its own kind of interesting thing, but kind of endorsing a position that in 2015 was seen as too left wing in 2024, when kind of Labour Party and government is probably maybe to the right of that 2015 position. I think was it was incredible testament both to our and our allies campaigning, but also to the recognition that this is a deeply unfair and untenable power.
Thanks so much, Samir. Yeah, really insightful there. And I think I share some of your cynicism about how sometimes these issues move up the agenda because they start to affect the people that can change it. And that doesn't just apply to journalists. I think if any politician needs to learn about the horrors of renting, they can just speak to their staff members in their offices most often, because when we get that short walk that you get between a meeting with a politician where their staffer is walking alongside you and they say, "Oh, Generation Rent, let me tell you what happened to me last month." There's always a story, and not all landlords are causing problems for renters, but every renter does have a story, and it's just important that we get that shared with politicians to not, to basically make sure we're taking the luck out of it. Dan mentioned luck before, but we want to take luck out of the system of renting. It shouldn't be, oh, I've been unlucky and this has happened. Those things that make you unlucky when they cause so much harm need to be banned, and they need to be enforced to stop those things from happening as well. So there's a few things I'm going to put a pin in that we'll come back to. So things like shifting internal politics, I thought would be interesting to talk about a bit more later. And also, why did it take so long? Not only from 2015, roughly when we started campaigning, but also from when the promise was made. I'd like to get into that a bit later on as well, because it does, campaigning is you're in it for the long game, I think, but it does beg the question about how have we effectively moved it along to make it reach this point, but also, is there anything we've learned about the kind of ways in which these things can be stalled and slowed down as well? So we'll come to that, but first, Sandy, very warm welcome to you. Thank you so much for joining us. So Sandy is a long-time supporter of Generation Rent, and has experience of some of these problems that we've mentioned already, which hopefully some of them will be fixed. But as we say, the bill doesn't solve everything. Sandy, do you mind if I ask you to introduce why you got involved with Generation Rent in the first place, and what kind of experiences you've had that you think are important for people to hear? You're just on mute there, Sandy, sorry. This is always the hardest bit, the technical stuff. You're still muted, I think, sorry. It might be your audio button at the bottom of your screen.
Yeah. Okay, can you hear me now?
That's it. Yeah, you're with us.
My grandson has been playing about with my laptop, and I couldn't get onto it, so I've had to actually come back to my phone. I was trying to get on there,
Sure.
but I can't. And
Well,
it's
you're
not
loud and
good on
clear.
my phone.
No problem.
Yeah, but we've been renting for many years. Goodness knows how many. Yes, a lot of years, and we've been evicted so many times. It's just become ridiculous. You just with children and everything, and I mean, I have grandchildren living with us, and again, and the last time we were evicted was only just very recently, and we've been there over 9 years, and then he decided to evict us after 9 years, and because he couldn't, because of the clause in our rent, he couldn't put the in our rental agreement, he couldn't put the rent up to where he wanted to. Because he couldn't make it as expensive as he wanted to, he decided to evict us. So it's yeah, it's a lot of fun. I was actually very ill at the time. I've been in that hospital. Joseph, please go away. I'm talking to people on all over the country. Go away. Again, grandchildren.
Yeah, can't catch a break.
Yeah, I've been in that hospital. I've been very ill, and I actually had to leave my partner and the children to pack the place up to move. And so things didn't go as well as they should have done, and the things left behind and all sorts. And so, he just made excuses like they do. It's like, yeah. Yeah, I've got to do this and that to it, and I can't have people living there. And I've no idea whether he actually did much work to it after we left or not. But, and we've been evicted because the place had been, the landlord rather, had it taken back by the bank. They got letters from we finally saw letters from the bank. We didn't know any of this was going on. We were happily paying rent, and he wasn't paying the mortgage with the rent. He was keeping the money, paying his own mortgage with it. And so we literally had 2 weeks to get out. Without having known what was going to happen. We had to pack and move in 2 weeks. And this was a 4-bedroom house. There's quite a lot of us in there. So that was a nightmare, getting packed and moved and out of there. There's another time when the landlady decided to turn it into a holiday flat. So we were living, I'm going to turn this into a holiday home, And so you've got to get out. Yes, I've no idea whether she's carried that on, but It wasn't a very salubrious area, really, to be honest. It seems a little bit of an odd decision, but her ones down in the old town had done so well. I thought, well, they would do. That's the touristy area. It's not necessarily so well here. But in the meantime, the rents are just soaring. And we're now paying £1,895 a month, which is one hell of a lot of money for us to find. And this is Hastings. It's not an area where people earn a lot of money. It's not an area where you would expect to pay this kind of rent. I mean, when I first moved here, one of the reasons was because it was cheap. The housing was cheap, rentals were cheap. It was, it was a good place to move to for that reason. But now it's just awful. And I just don't know. I don't know what the youngsters do. I mean, I think they have great difficulty finding anywhere to go at all, or a landlord that will actually deal with them at all. This town is just, it's getting worse, I think, and everything is getting worse everywhere here. And in the meantime, there's nothing like the amount of social housing there should be, especially in a town like this one. It's a lot of social problems and a lot of people earning very little. I mean, a lot of people going out to work and earning only what, 16,000 a year, and then they're trying to pay rent on that, and with the council tax having soared as well. It's ridiculous to find that we're paying more than people in sort of Knightsbridge pay.
And you're paying more, Sandy, than someone on £16,000 a year. You're paying more than that just in your rent. So how's someone like that supposed to find somewhere to live
Exactly.
on that income?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's just horrendous. It really is. And for years and years and years, the government has just been going on and that's like not doing anything about it and not doing anything about it. And we all actually thought because they were doing it, they were bringing it to the board. Hooray! We won't get evicted from here. But that didn't happen, did it? And we did get evicted because it's just gone on for so long. And we have, we and the other thing that I would really like to see, besides the Section 21 ending, is rent controls back. We used to have rent officers that went around and set fair rents for rental properties. Why can't we have that back? That would make sense to people. Yeah, a fair rent. Rather than people who are just collecting massive amounts of money for nothing. I mean, you would think the rent that we pay on this place, we get some kind of luxury property, but we haven't. There are all sorts of problems with it. And we've had to keep complaining about this and complaining about that. And, and just thinking, well, let's hope that they actually bring this bill in now, before the agent decides that they've had enough of us complaining and decide to kick us out because of it. Because, of course, they still could. We're still vulnerable. And that has happened before.
Yeah, I absolutely hear that, Sandy. I think that's really useful for people to hear, especially if we've got anyone watching who's involved in the government, is the impact of this delay to changing the law, having had it promised for 6 years, has been that people have been made vulnerable that whole time. So these evictions are still happening. Yeah,
they've been evicted again, and they could easily be evicted again as things are going on. So you worry about reporting the things that are wrong with the house. You worry about, shall I report it or shall I see if I can get that fixed myself?
Yeah.
Because they might decide to turn around and go, right, that's it, we've had enough of this. And boot us out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Sandy, we'll come back to talk about rent controls a bit later, because that might be one of the things we talk about in terms of what's missing in the law that's going to pass. But the eviction protections, what would that mean to you then? Because you've been part of our journey as well in trying to change that law, and we're nearly there.
You can relax in knowing that you're not going to be kicked out of your home, that you're not going to have to move again, and And it would be nice to be able to relax in that. Think, okay, well,
Mm.
this is we can make this into a nice home. We can spend money on the place. Because we did that with the last place. It was like, we were according to our rental agreement, it was us that had to do all the decorating and things, and we did. We decorated this place. We spent thousands, nice new carpets and everything, just to put it out.
Mm.
And I didn't want to go through that again.
Yeah.
And look at it again, yeah, I could do it with a repaint, but I'm not going to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much, Sandy. I really appreciate you sharing that. We'll have a bit of a conversation now. So I'll kind of bring each panelist
Yes.
in as we go. And if the audience wants to put in any questions, then do
Yep.
use the Q&A function as well. But just Dan, if I can turn to you, because you've been working with people in Sandy's position for quite some time now, in terms of involving renters that are experiencing the very worst impact of our terrible system. And what does it do to campaigning to involve people's voices like this, to be able to get them in front of politicians or the media?
It's incredibly powerful. I think a lot of MPs will hear from tenants experiencing this sort of thing, but not every it's sort of in the course of their people's desperation, they'll go to their MP if they can't get anything out of the council, if they can't get anything out of the lettings market. But I think being able to go to Parliament, we took one of the things we did a couple of years ago was take renters from all over the country to Parliament to meet their MPs, and just sit face to face and explain what happened to them, and I think that's really powerful. It's so much more powerful than just a report with statistics, which is important, but I think you need to have people. People, we all respond to stories, and it's the same is true of MPs and decision makers as well. That there's always the need to have a really strong case, but you also need the stories to get people's attention, to kind of really connect with their emotions around what this means on a personal level. And yeah, without that, it makes campaigning a lot harder. So yeah, Sandy has been part of that. Really, really grateful for her but ability to tell her story on in the media. So and yeah, many more dozens of people have been part of that over the years.
Thanks, Dan. Absolutely. It's the beating heart of our movement, really, is the renters whose experience is what we're trying to change, but whose experience is also core to how we communicate what's happening. And the majority of Generation Rent employees, myself included, are privately renting as well. So these are experiences that are, on an ongoing basis, many of us are facing. Samir, can I bring you in with your journalist hat on, if that's all right? Just thinking about the voice of renters, which can sound quite nebulous, but fortunately we're hearing it right now. In terms of the voice of renters, it's felt like that can be overpowered by the voice of homeowners, for example, but also by the voice of landlords, who are very well organised in terms of their campaigning efforts, coordinated, professionalised, and can be quite formidable in the way that they campaign to not lose any of what they would see as their rights, even if it's important that renters gain rights of their own too. Do you think the renters' voice in the media has grown over the years, and what do you think's been a big driver of that?
The renter voice has definitely grown over the years, and I think a large part of that has been organizations like Generation Rent, renters unions, Shelter, etc. Basically, like highlighting people's individual stories, these kind of like outrageous stories of the treatment of landlords and lettings agents. I was just thinking back to maybe many years back now, but there was I think this was one that Generation Rent highlighted, which was appeared in the Telegraph of all places, of a lettings agent that charged some ridiculous fee for someone to leave a contract, and then for basically for one person to move out of a house share and someone else to move in. And they wanted to charge them like £1,200 or something. It was an astronomical fee. It happened to be down the road from where I was living at the time, and we basically kind of got together about a dozen people and picketed this place. And it was in the local newspaper and a few other kind of places. But it all came from from this like story, a person's story about a thing that had happened to them, and the resonance that can have beyond there's the dry statistics of kind of like, well, this affects X number of people in Y amount of way, and that's very much the kind of policy speak that speaks to the value of doing it, but the immediacy of it actually comes from the stories. Like if MPs and policymakers are getting lots and lots of emails, letters, etc. from people, then that will move up the agenda. Whereas kind of there are definitely other very worthy and very important policy changes that need to happen in the UK that sadly just don't have the kind of cachet because of the nature of the issue, because the kind of campaign around it isn't as well organized. But I think if you've seen the renter voice grow, you've definitely kind of seen landlords become better organized. I'd say kind of when they started, they were a little bit ramshackle.
You just change the plug down here.
And it was largely a case of actually kind of policymakers who opposed improving renters' rights. I feel kind of largely coming up from an ideological perspective rather than being kind of heavily lobbied into it. Whereas actually that lobbying voice has grown much stronger and much more evidenced in their kind of case as well. It was all a bit kind of strange and cowboyish at the start from the landlord lobby side, in my opinion.
Interesting. I mean, that's a really interesting insight, isn't it, into campaigning, where one group that's trying to assert its rights in the form of ending Section 21, for example, leads to a pushback in which another group that wants to hold on to those, the ability to do what they want with their property, and they invest in that. They've got the resources, unlike the renters movement, and it's all a bit of an arms race, isn't it, in terms of campaigning? So, which is why you kind of got to be quite smart with your campaigning and how you choose your battles, pick your issues, and take that forward.
And home ownership has a very psychologically dominant place in kind of British politics in the way that it doesn't in continental Europe. Home ownership is seen as the kind of pinnacle of achievement, and the way our kind of policy and financial kind of framework works is that it is far, far, far better to be a homeowner or a person with a mortgage than it is to be a renter. If you can get to like as it's currently set up, but that's not. But obviously, homeownership is not accessible to lots of people, and actually is not necessarily a good decision for lots of people. But because there is a kind of somewhat of a fixation on homeownership as a personal goal and achievement, and as such, it very much has that hold over public policy. Government's still very interested in subsidising and promoting home ownership rather than a kind of variety of tenures and forms of housing that actually kind of meet the diversity of needs that people have and the diversity of needs that the economy has.
Absolutely. Thanks, Samir. We're going to come to questions just in a moment, but Sandy, I'm just going to use that point that Samir's made to ask you a question, which is around home ownership and the ability to escape renting, as it were. You already mentioned social housing, and there's not enough social housing available. And if there's not the ability to own your own home as well, it means many of us are trapped in renting. One of the things we've been talking to government about is how do you make renting attractive? How do you make renters like us recommend renting to other people? Do you have an idea? I know I'm putting you on the spot here, but Sandy, do you have an idea of what kind of thing would need to happen for you to actually recommend renting, to say this is a good thing, something I want to do for the rest of my life? Sorry, you're just on mute, Sandy. That's it.
Right, can you hear me now?
That's it. Yep.
Yeah, okay. I mean, it can be a good thing, especially for young people, because it means you're not tied to one area.
Mm.
But you can actually leave and go somewhere else, and like, you know, you're offered a job the other end of the country, you can say okay, and like sort it out, back up, and move, which you can't do if you own your property. So it can be useful for people when they're younger, especially. You know, one of the things that originally attracted me to it is I could move around. You know? But it needs to be. I mean, you need to actually have a property that you know is going to be decent, and then it needs to be dry, and and not actually. I mean, we've lived in one place we had the worst neighbours you could possibly have, and the agent knew all about that, but they didn't tell us anything about it. So we moved in there, and it was just yeah, yeah. Yeah. I mean, you know, you need to be able to feel that you can move when you want to move, and not actually be moved out by them, and then not have the rent go up and up and up and up. But like, you know, that's the rent. There's the place. Yeah, and just move in there and actually pay the rent and feel that it's your home while you're there. But I mean, as it is now, you're just always thinking, when are they going to move us out? Are they going to evict us? You know?
Yep.
You have an envelope pushed to the door, and you're thinking, is that eviction notice? Because that's how it comes. It never comes in the post. By hand through the door. Yeah.
Yep. That's, I mean, that's something we hear a lot when we speak to people who have been evicted. One of the saddest things to hear is they move into their new home, and rather than feeling like, you know, this is great, I'm in my new home, I can settle in, because they've been evicted, they actually are aware of how weak the protections are, and they feel more at risk, and they find it difficult to settle in. So yeah, I think you
end up at the point where you just like nothing can feel properly like home. You know, and you just give up. You give up trying to make it nice. You give up trying to like make it feel homely, because you might only be there for 6 months.
Yeah.
And you just never know.
Yeah.
And that's not fair. It's not a good way to live. And it's not a good thing when you're bringing up children. You know, it's not good for them. Children need to feel that they have a home. And that this neighbourhood is theirs. That, you know, yeah.
Absolutely.
It doesn't need to be moved around over and over and over.
Couldn't agree more. I think you know, you've put it perfectly, Sandy, in terms of we're not asking for much, are we? It's the ability to feel at home, and in order to do that, it helps to have flexibility, because that's part of the promise of renting. So you should be able to move out, and, you know, put in your own notice. But there needs to be the basic minimum of, you know, it should be a decent, safe place to live. It should be affordable, and you should have the security where you know you're not going to be evicted at a moment's notice as well. That's exactly the kind of things we're campaigning for.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Thanks, Sandy. Great. Let's jump into some questions then, from the audience who've been very patient. We're running short on time. We've got about 5 minutes left, so we'll try and do these relatively quick fire, if that's all right. I'm going to go from the bottom up, which is controversial, I know, but it just seems slightly more straightforward. So the first question is about, do we know when Section 21 will be abolished, and will it still be dealt with even if they have abolished within the 2 months notice? So I'll answer that very quickly. Section 21, the date in which that will end, is going to be set when this law passes. So that's something called royal assent. It's when the king signs off the law, and then it basically becomes an act rather than a bill. So that's going to happen soon, we think, because it's, as I say, it's back in Parliament for the final stage next Wednesday. So it should be within the next few weeks, probably November time, I think, maybe late October if we're lucky. And that's when they'll announce the date in which Section 21 ends. Because it's going to end all at once, which is a bit different to the old Conservative bill. So it's going to end not only for new contracts that people are signing, but also for the existing rental contracts that we have. There's going to be a lead-in time to make sure that those contracts can all be changed properly and with the proper guidance. We're expecting that to be a few months, not many months, but a few. So we think by early spring next year would be the end of Section 21. But keep in touch with Generation Rent, follow our website. We'll be making sure you're crystal clear on when that comes into effect. Unfortunately, there will be the ability for landlords to continue using Section 21 until that point. And so there'll still be the 2 months notice. But once that law changes, once there's no more Section 21, the notice period for the, as other people have mentioned, the sale ground for a landlord selling or moving in, there'll be 4 months, which is a massive success for our campaign because it was originally going to be still 2 months and we got that doubled. So really pleased with that. But sadly, it's not going to take effect until likely after Christmas. So keep telling us your stories if anything happens during that time, and we'll keep passing that to Parliament and government to make sure that they act as quickly as possible. The next one is about the rent control, something that Sandy mentioned, the need to slam the brakes on soaring rents. Dan, is this going to be an ongoing campaign of ours?
Yes, it is. We have been calling for rent rises to be capped at the lower of wage growth or inflation. At the moment, and under the plans is you can challenge a rent increase at a tribunal, but the tribunal will look at what new tenancies are going for in the market and say that's the rent that the landlord can charge. So in a lot of cases, those types of increases, particularly if we've seen rent rises throughout the market like we saw in 2022 and 2023, that will be unaffordable for a lot of tenants whose wages aren't going up as fast as the rents are. So this is something we want to keep pushing with the government. There are a couple of opportunities. One is devolving powers to mayors in city regions. A lot of mayors are actually calling for this themselves. There's also an opportunity. The government has got a lot of resistance from the House of Lords around just their plans to rely on the tribunal to deal with rent challenges. They're talking about bringing in another mechanism to manage those, and we think that's an opportunity to kind of have a sensible limit on rent rises as part of that. But that's it, sort of in the we don't have any detail from the government about what that will be or when it will be, but that's something we'll a chance to push that again.
Great. Thanks very much, Dan. I will just reassure people that I'm not surprised by Dan's answer there. I asked it as if I didn't know if we were going to campaign on it, but this is something we talk about a lot in terms of where we go next. And as you've seen from the amount of time it's taken to end Section 21, sometimes these are you're in it for the long haul. These are really long-term campaigns. People can't afford for this to take as long as the end of Section 21 has. Like they literally can't afford it because of how much rents are soaring at the moment. So we will be continuing to keep our campaigners updated on that, and we welcome everyone's support on that front. We're almost out of time. In fact, we are out of time, but I'm going to just give one quick final question to Samir, if that's all right. It was a question about landlords threatening to sell the home because of the extra obligations that they have, something we're very sympathetic to tenants that face this situation, absolutely. But with ending Section 21, we've seen this threat non-stop from landlords that they'll all sell because they can no longer use that eviction ground as well. Effectively, nothing would ever change, I think, if we took that literally every time. But it can happen to some people, and we're really conscious of that as well. So, Samir, what do you think? Is it too much pressure on landlords? Are they should they be taxed less?
short answer, no. Long answer, I think, for example, if we want to invest more in housing stock, so for example, like if we want heat pumps and everything, then you can look at like specific incentives around that. I think being a landlord per se, you shouldn't be getting tax breaks beyond what any other business should be, because fundamentally being a landlord is being a small business, and a lot of the poor practice we've seen over the years has been basically as a result of this idea that it's somehow you're right as a person who owns a house to be a landlord, whereas so much work has been put in over the years to actually be kind of like, well, no, you need to be aware of the law, aware of your responsibilities, and actually if per se, for me, if those people leave the market, then the homes that they own will still exist. They may be sold to people who become owner occupiers, but they may also be sold to landlords who can make it work as a business for them in a market that has stronger right to renters. I mean, you could use the parallel of like, oh, if we improve like food standards, then like some takeaways and restaurants will go out of business. It's like, well, no, it's important to have food standards. It's the actual cost of having poor food standards is worse for society at that point. And so we need to be thinking about what we're incentivizing, both through the kind of tax system and the kind of regulation system. We want to incentivize good quality housing that improves like society's general benefit and kind of goodness in society, rather than feeding the kind of financial system of it all.
Yep. Thanks so much. Couldn't agree more. Samir, thank you. Hopefully that answers the question there. Sorry, we've run out of time for the new questions that are coming in now, but thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. And if you've been supporting Generation Rent throughout this journey that we've been talking about, we really, really do appreciate it. We couldn't do it without you. Our movement is everything to us. I just want to thank the panelists as well. So Dan, an enormous thank you for 11 plus years of being at the very heart of Generation Rent and helping us to achieve what's been achieved. Even this week, it's amazing to be at the cusp. We've been saying nearly there for a long time, but now we really are nearly there in terms of this change. So I hope you're very proud of that. We're certainly proud of you. Samir, as well, thank you as our longest standing board member for all your commitment to the cause in your free time, if you can call it free, when you've been put so much into this work as an amazing campaigner in your own right as well. We're really grateful for that. And Sandy, thank you so much for all of your insights today, but also for supporting us over the last few years and getting your voice heard. It takes a lot to be able to stand up and say that what's happened to you isn't right, but also to reach that next point of knowing that it can be better and it must be better. So we're really grateful for you bringing that to us. And I'll just finish with a point that you made, actually, Sandy, which is about we just want to be able to feel at home. And our hope is that when this law passes, there's 12 million renters, private renters in England. Our hope is that many more people will be able to feel at home and get all of the benefits that come with that after this law passes. But there will be more to do, as we've talked about, particularly around the cost of renting, and Generation Rent will absolutely be at the forefront of that campaign as well. So hopefully we can take some of the lessons and the collaboration and the people that we've brought along on this journey into that next journey. But in the meantime, just a massive thank you and a celebration, I suppose, of what has been achieved, because we can make change when we work together, and I really appreciate it. So thanks, everyone. Take care. Have a good evening.